Seneca wrote that as practical observation, not moral instruction. He had spent years inside Nero's court, one of the most psychologically corrosive environments in Roman history. He understood, from inside, what proximity to certain kinds of minds does to the clarity of one's own. Most people assume that what makes someone mentally strong is the ability to resist being affected, to remain unmoved, to feel nothing. The research tells a different story. Mental strength, in the psychological sense, is not the absence of emotional response. It is a capacity to experience a full emotional response and still choose what to do with it. The two things are not the same, and confusing them is expensive. The clinical literature uses precise language for this. A personality that chronically dysregulates others through manipulation, unpredictability, emotional volatility, or sustained withdrawal does something specific to the nervous systems of people around it. It keeps them in a state of low-grade vigilance. The brain allocates resources to threat detection. Less is available for everything else. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, developing polyvagal theory at the University of Illinois in the 1990s, described the mechanism precisely. The autonomic nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for signals of safety or danger. It does this below the level of conscious thought, and when it detects chronic unpredictability from a significant other, a partner, a parent, a manager, it doesn't wait for a conscious decision. It shifts state. The person being dysregulated rarely names what is happening. They notice they feel worse after certain interactions. They notice that in some relationships, their thinking becomes less clear, but the mechanism is invisible because the nervous system doesn't send a report. It just shifts. There's a very common response to a dysregulating relationship, the attempt to understand it, to find the explanation that makes the behavior make sense. If I understand why they do this, the thinking goes, I will stop being affected by it. This is one of the most durable illusions in emotional life, and it is precisely backwards. Understanding the mechanism of someone's dysregulating behavior does not protect the nervous system from that behavior. The autonomic response doesn't wait for the cortex. A person can have a complete and compassionate theory of why someone is psychologically harmful and still be harmed at a neurological level by continued proximity. Comprehension and protection are different systems. The illusion persists because it feels like progress. Understanding feels like doing something. There is something deeply uncomfortable about acknowledging that understanding alone, without structural change in proximity or engagement, changes very little about what the nervous system is experiencing. The mind wants a cognitive solution to a physiological problem, and those are not the same problem. In the 1990s, psychologist James Gross at Stanford University began a systematic study of how people regulate emotion. His research produced one of the most replicated findings in effective psychology. The most effective form of emotion regulation is not suppression and not expression. It is what Gross called cognitive reappraisal, the deliberate act of changing the meaning assigned to a situation before the full emotional response has consolidated. Gross found that people who practiced reappraisal regularly showed lower physiological arousal in response to stressful interactions, better memory, and more stable social relationships over time. The emotional experience remained. What changed was a relationship to it, not suppression, not performance of calm, but a genuine structural shift in how the nervous system was processing incoming signal. Gross also found that people who defaulted to suppression showed a paradoxical increase in physiological arousal in the presence of the very people they were trying to manage around. The effort of suppression in high-stakes relationships amplifies the stress response it was designed to reduce. The body cannot be fooled by the performance of equanimity. Seneca spent the last years of his life navigating Nero's court, a relationship defined by the emperor's unpredictability, paranoia, and escalating violence. He was eventually ordered to take his own life. What the historical record shows is not that Seneca was unaffected. His letters from this period are full of anxiety, physical illness, and moments of despair. What they also show is a man who had developed a capacity to observe his own emotional states without being entirely governed by them. Eleanor Roosevelt spent decades in a marriage to Franklin D. Roosevelt that biographers have described as emotionally isolating, frequently humiliating, and punctuated by prolonged absences and betrayal. The psychological literature on her development describes a specific arc: a young woman with severe social anxiety who, through sustained confrontation with relationships that offered no reliable emotional return, developed what her biographers call a studied detachment. Not indifference, but the capacity to function and connect from a regulated interior even in the absence of external stability. What both figures demonstrate is not immunity. What they developed was something the clinical literature now calls affect tolerance, the capacity to remain in contact with difficult emotional experience without either collapsing into it or dissociating from it. That capacity is not a personality trait. It is a skill that develops under specific conditions, through specific practice, and it develops slowly. There is a cost of prolonged exposure to dysregulating relationships that doesn't show up immediately. It appears as gradual change. The person becomes slightly less certain of their perceptions. Their emotional range contracts. Their internal narrative begins to incorporate the other person's framings, not through agreement, but through the slow erosion of an alternative. Psychologist Judith Herman at Harvard Medical School, in her 1992 work Trauma and Recovery, described what she called complex trauma, the specific psychological injury that results from prolonged exposure to a relationship in which the other person holds power and uses it unpredictably. Herman's finding was precise. The damage is not primarily to the memory of events. It is to the capacity for self-regulation itself. The specific cost that Herman identified is the gradual erosion of the ability to trust one's own emotional signals. The person who has spent years in proximity to someone whose behavior systematically contradicts their stated intentions begins to distrust not the other person, but themselves. They begin to doubt their perceptions, to question whether what they felt was real. And that doubt, once installed, doesn't disappear when the relationship does. Mental strength, in the presence of a dysregulating personality, is not a disposition. It is not a fixed quality some people have and others don't. It is a set of capacities for affect tolerance, for reappraisal, for maintaining contact with one's own emotional signal under conditions of sustained interference, that develop through practice, often through difficulty, and never fully once and for all. The research is consistent on one thing: what distinguishes a regulated mind from a dysregulated one, in these encounters, is not the absence of impact. It is the presence of a system that can process impact without losing its orientation. Not immunity, not indifference, something more specific and considerably harder to build. What the dysregulating relationship costs and what the regulated mind protects is not happiness. It is a capacity to know what one feels and to mean it. Inner observer. Observe your mind. Understand reality.